on trying to build an algorithm that ideally manages my nutrition, maybe also in the future my health. Now this is the subpart of this video, or the subpart of this larger theme where I talk about building an algorithm to run my life, and this is the subpart nutrition. Now if we take a look at nutrition, I would say there are three different things. Of course you can categorize them differently. The first one would be hydration, the second one would be supplements, and the third one would be food. Now in terms of hydration, I just now exclude this. I usually drink electrolyted water, so the electrolytes would also be maybe already supplementation, because this is something I add, but for simplification, at least in my mind, I now exclude this. Now, in terms of the supplements, one could think of supplements as something that is the side effect of food you ingest. It could also be the side effect of water you ingest. So you could also say, again, that electrolyte is also a supplement, but then you could also say that you take things like capsules that ideally would be in food, but they are not in food because food might have might not. So food that would be sufficiently supplemented with side effects, you could say, would not be available to you in your price range. So therefore it would be cheaper to supplement something and then to eat something else. But mostly I think of supplements as the things you ingest, and think of not so as nutrition and or food, and food as kind of the rest you eat in order to get mostly your energy. You could also make the separation or the distinction that these are kind of the micronutrients, and the micronutrient need is kind of filled by the supplements, but to a certain extent it should also be filled by the food, obviously. But if the food does not fill your, or does not satiate your micronutrient needs, then of course it might only leave the macronutrients for the food itself. Depending on whether or where you actually draw this distinction, you might think differently about this. Now, where is the current state of optimizing this and also turning it into an algorithm? Now, one might think of an algorithm as just a program that runs in Visual Studio, for example, but what an algorithm could also be is just rules. Now, these rules could basically be implemented maybe in an algorithm, and if I think of myself, for example, I am just maybe an execution machine. I am just the agent that is this part of my brain that has evolved to do something else which the other part of the brain cannot do. I have very many limitations. I, for example, cannot stay awake for 30 hours because then the other part of me shuts me down. So I'm kind of an employee of myself. I am an employee of my body. The thinking me is kind of an employee of my body. I can be fired at any point in time. If I don't have food, then I can be very hungry, and so my cognitive function is kind of overpowered by these lower functions of my body. But now the question is, how can I, as kind of the executive or the CEO, with me being kind of the forebrain and so on and so forth, there might be different things or might be different perspectives you can take on this. One might say that thinking is fast and thinking is slow, as Daniel Kahneman said, and now I am kind of the slower thinking, more long-term brain, or part of my brain, and therefore also speaking and so on and so forth. But of course some parts are also controlled simultaneously by the other part of my brain, subconscious, maybe also unconscious. But not so much, I am not unconscious right now. What I'm trying to say here is that over the long term, ideally I would basically nudge myself into improving myself. And in terms of nutrition, ideally I would approach the ideal nutrition. I think I do approach the ideal hydration. I want to also talk quickly about hydration, even though I said previously I would exclude this. Now, in terms of hydration, there are two things. The first thing is basically the water itself, and the second thing is what you put additionally maybe into the water. Or you could also say you don't put additionally into the water, but nonetheless there seems to be just the water itself and then the additional qualities, similar with supplements and also food. Now, in the water I drink, I usually now have electrolytes in there, but if I lived in a region where I didn't have to have electrolytes in there because there were higher minerals, for example, or the electrolytes would already be in food, then this would also maybe be something to consider. Similar with the food, where in some regions, or if you home grow your tomatoes, you might have a higher mineral density and so on and so forth, or a higher micronutrient density, let's just say. In terms of how much, then, the question of how much, not so much the quality of the water, I now have again relied on kind of an algorithm. Now, Brian Johnson, a biohacker or entrepreneur turned biohacker, you could say, but he doesn't think of himself as a biohacker. I don't know exactly what he is trying to brand himself as, but he already mentioned this. it is a rejuvenation athlete. So he tries to rejuvenate himself, basically reverse his age. Now, what he mentioned multiple times, that he often proposes the question of how much water you should drink to other people in order to then explain to them and maybe nudge them into thinking differently about all these different conventions we have and so on and so forth. But what one also could use is, in response to this question, is to rely on heuristics. And now a heuristic is basically something, a simplification algorithm, one could say, that has been developed, such as dividing time into multiple buckets. And we don't divide time into buckets of 72 seconds the one day and then 88 seconds and 2.5 milliseconds the next day. Because we have these distinct buckets that we put time into, we can think about time and we can also talk about time. So it's kind of a heuristic to put time into these units. Now, if then you build multiple of these systems and you layer them on top of each other, you might have an algorithm that has you in the middle, and then it relies on another node that relies on another node, and you might have some intelligence in these nodes and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to nutrition and specifically hydration, if I include hydration in nutrition, or I can basically say nutrition is everything I put basically into my mouth in order to get my nutrient as well as my water needs satiated, then I would say that it would probably make sense to also now rely on something else already. So there could be a recommendation by a National Institute for Hydration, for example, and there are actually kind of these recommendations exist, but I don't know them, and I don't want to dive into this and write maybe 20 pages on this just in order to justify how much water I should drink to justify basically the necessity of figuring this out once to then figure out how much water I should drink during a given day. Now, what I also could use in order to try to answer this question Brian Johnson proposes is heuristics. And one of these heuristics is that I rely on something that somebody else has put together, and this somebody else has put together could be, again, a recommendation, but now it would be nice if this recommendation would be individualized to me. Now, if this recommendation would be individualized to me, then it would maybe also include my sweat loss during an activity. So therefore, it might use data which has been recorded by me for activities, not for activities. So I record activities ideally, and this influences this. Now, maybe I have a specific need where I do need more water. Maybe I live in summer, for example, compared to winter, where maybe I need to drink more depending on other factors. Maybe I need to drink more because I have not slept properly, and so on and so forth. So ideally, there would be something that includes the most variables it can include, and then come up with how much should you drink. And to the extent at which I have access to something like this, I now have access to this on my Garmin watch. Now, there might also be something similar on my Samsung watch, but I just have found that with the tactile feedback I get on these buttons, I am more likely to actually track things on my Garmin watch. And so what I have now here is the hydration function. And in this case, the hydration function of my Garmin watch tells me to now drink 3,400 milliliters. I think the baseline is somewhere around 2.5 or 2.8. And then additionally, it accounts for the workout I did already today. And so the question of how much I should drink is now answered with the quality of the water. So this is not how much I should drink, but rather what kind of water I should drink, electrolyted water, as kind of experienced and tested by me, and the question of how much the quantity then is answered by this here. And now I have been tracking this for the last couple of days, and I try to get this in, and now I kind of know what I'm actually drinking, and usually it's a little bit too little. So the recommendation if I work out daily is around 3.5 to 4 liters, and it's actually not that easy to get 3.5 or 4 liters in. Recently, for example, I was at the gym and they asked me how much do I drink during a given day, and I actually had no idea. Maybe it was 2 liters on some days, maybe it was 5 liters on some other days, or 6 liters. In the past I used to drink quite a lot, but that's not so much the topic of this video. The topic of this video is mostly now about nutrition, or what I want to discuss now is mostly nutrition. In order to now ideally get your ideal nutrients in, we can make the assumption that at any given point in time you have different nutrient needs. Now they vary. Maybe the next second, for example, I would have slightly different nutrient needs. For example, if I do a workout and then I get thirstier and thirstier and thirstier, then maybe with every 10 seconds I do get a little bit thirstier. It depends on how small the increments actually are. But what you can say is that it changes all the time. And then also, if you get hungry over the next couple of hours, and for me this is a process that might take hours. For example, I worked out in the morning and now I'm slightly hungry, but I'm not that hungry that I would eat the fridge right now. So what I'm trying to say here is that in order to get your ideal nutrients, and of course your ideal nutrients or your ideal food solution, nutrient solution, might also include factors like, okay, sometimes it makes sense to fast. So maybe over a given year, we schedule a certain amount of days where you actually are fasting for 12 hours, for 15 hours. Maybe it is better for your circadian rhythm and also including your light exposure you had, and maybe you didn't sleep that much last night, so therefore your insulin resistance might be off. So therefore we now tinker around a bit, and this is now what you get. What you get is maybe, and I already discussed this in another video, but this went up on another channel, so therefore I want to include this again here. The factor of food might be something like a bottle. It might be something that you can drink because then you don't have to chew it. Now, of course, you might argue that you then get rid of the possible satiation effects or satiety effects of chewing, and you also might need to work out your facial muscles and your jaw muscles and so on and so forth. But similarly, how we all don't work in the woods all day long because we need to get wood somehow, and similarly, how we all are not farmers anymore, we might also basically get the different variables out of a certain activity we do and then optimize towards all of these different functions and then have all of these different functions optimized. This morning, for example, I worked out. I worked out for 40 minutes and then I got back. And now I can do different things. I don't have to be active all day, even though it would additionally probably benefit me. Now with food, it might be similar. Why not get the ideal nutrition in something like this? And then you might also have the social function of nutrition. This could be that you separate out 500 calories, for example, and these calories you can additionally eat. But then all of your nutritional needs would already be met, and this would just be something that is kind of additional. Similarly to how in the recent days and recent weeks I have been testing again, working out in a social environment. So on the one side, I have the workouts that fulfill my need to be worked out, or my body to be worked out, and therefore to optimize for longevity. And on the other side, I sometimes like working out with people, moving with other people. And by separating these functions and by saying, okay, this is what I do in the morning, and sometimes every couple of days or every second week, I do something like this at night where I go to a social workout, where also the function of me is not only being the trainee, but also being the trainer in terms of the morning workout, is separated out into an external trainer, which I then can use in order also to get rid of the responsibility and kind of enjoy this whole process more, because I am not the optimization algorithm as well as the thing that is executing the optimization algorithm. Now, in terms of nutrition, one might therefore think, and already multiple companies have come up with solutions to nutrition that are drinkable. One might then separate out the different functions of food. So you could say, okay, I chew for 60 minutes a day, maybe it's 10 hours a day. I chew very hard gum in order to have the best effect. And because food might already be kind of in a form that is like pudding all the time, if you don't eat meat or if you don't eat 10 kilograms of carrots a week, then you might already have food that is kind of squishy. If you think about fries, for example, they're kind of squishy, and many other things are also kind of squishy. So in order to properly replace what you otherwise would need to invest in terms of time, but also in terms of chewing effort, of kind of a diet we evolutionary have evolved towards, you would already maybe have to replace something like this with chewing. But now, if you want to think about this and you want to think about these different functions, then it might make potentially sense to further basically separate these different functions, and maybe to then drink your food and then to chew gum for, let's say, 2 hours a day. And that might be very hard, so it might even overall, so the net benefit of this would basically be better compared to the thing before that had all of these different functions combined. If you, for example, go in the morning to the gym and then you talk 2 hours to people while working out, then all of the different functions combined might have a lower utility compared to separating out these functions, because at least for me, mentally, that's easier. So now, if you think about something that is a shake, or something that you can drink. Now, there might be different solutions to this. I tried actually meal prepping in boxes, but then you have the boxes and then you need to get them somewhere because you're not at home all day. And so therefore you need to take your food with you. And maybe you could get a restaurant delivered or restaurant food delivered to you, or maybe you just go to a restaurant, or maybe you just go to a supermarket. But all of these different things just have side effects. And these side effects are that if you go to a restaurant, then there is a different incentive vector, you could say, from the restaurant compared to you. You maybe want to optimize for longevity, whereas the restaurant optimizes for the longevity of its business. That might need, and this might mean that you might become addicted to sugar, for example, or to food or to the food because there is sugar in the food. Not addicted in a clinical sense, but much more in a common language sense. And so therefore there are these different optimizations happening. And because these different optimizations probably have been happening for hundreds, maybe thousands of years in terms of the human evolution, we now have foods that are basically that are basically at a given hunger threshold. So what I'm thinking about is usually this. At a given hunger threshold, so basically there is a nutrient need, and now my body has hunger, and this program hunger says that I should eat these foods. Now, often there seems to also be a direction towards specific foods that my hunger actually kind of is already including, and therefore telling kind of me as the agent, look for tomatoes right now because we just went to the sauna and seems to be a mineral issue, or I don't know what exactly I do when I eat tomatoes and cucumber after I go to the sauna on Sunday. So now, here is I actually lost my train of thought. I have to be honest about this. So let's go back to kind of the ideal solution, maybe to nutrition. And if you think about something you can drink, then something you can drink is probably something that's very close to something like this. And now the companies that have come up with different ideal nutrition options exist, and the food they provide is usually in the powder form. Why? Because then you don't have to chew it, because then you can swallow it already, and this seems to be the most time efficient. Maybe there might be an artificial texture. Some companies already have experimented with this, or maybe you just have the normal texture of actual food, but then with actual food you have then different problems, because some parts of maybe a recipe might need to be refrigerated, and some others might not be, or actually frozen. And then how do you cover the period from leaving something at the factory, let's say, of the food, or at the restaurant of the food, to you, and then you need to come up with boxes that maybe last for 2 days and cool the food and so on and so forth. So there are multiple different problems involved with this. So these companies seem to have come up with a food shake. Now, I've tried a few food shakes in the last couple of years, and mostly in the last 2 years, and I've also tried to make my own, and currently I'm experimenting with different powders. So I basically bought these different ingredients these companies usually include, and I am trying to kind of get them together into a shake, but I don't really know if it is worth the time investment. And also, in terms of outsourcing this, do I want to maybe have an algorithm that ideally tracks maybe my activity, my heart rate, also my respiratory rate, also my oxygen levels, also my blood glucose levels in the future, currently not available on these watches, maybe also my blood pressure in real time, and so on and so forth, and maybe also measures blood markers in real time. Now, this is not possible at this point in time. Maybe it is in 10 years, maybe it's in 15 years, I don't know. Maybe it's in 50 years or 200 years. At this point in time, if you want to actually kind of get a better picture, you usually need to get your blood drawn. And this is now where kind of a different algorithm comes into, or docks kind of to the main algorithm that is kind of my brain in order to manage my life. And this algorithm now is basically a company that interprets blood value results or blood marker results. And this company is called Inside Tracker. Now, there might be other companies. I just happen to have tried this one. I don't know if there's a better one out there. I don't know if... I also have my serious doubts about this company in terms of a few things. It seems also very old, for example. It seems like it was made 10 years ago, and it is kind of slowly updating. Similarly, Garmin also feels kind of old every now and then. But it doesn't really matter, and that's just now my personal user experience opinion. For example, you have the app, and in the app you have things. And now these things in the app don't are not all synchronized to the cloud. Not all synchronized to the cloud, not all synchronized to the web, I should rather say. So on the web, you have kind of a different platform compared to here. Some things are similar, but you cannot access all of the same things on the app versus the web, which is somewhat confusing to me. Now, the idea now is that something tracks in real time my health. Now, of course, different things are approximating this. I have 2 watches in order to account for redundancy, or in order to get redundancy. If I have a very bad sleep score, for example, then I just check the other watch, and the other watch, if the other watch says something entirely different, for example, last night Garmin got not the 2 additional hours of sleep I had after I woke up during the night, but Samsung did. So Samsung gave me a 76 or an 82 or something like this, and Garmin gave me a 67. And so there already I have a little bit more coverage in terms of redundancy. The sentence, I think, did not make the most sense, especially with these 2 words. Now, Inside Tracker, or a system like this, and Brian Johnson, for example, also seems to be trying to build a system like this, but it is just not usable at this point in time. At this point in time, he is doing a study, or rather an attempt at a study, because currently it seems not to be a study. I don't know if this is a proper scientific study or if it is not, but to 2,500 people he gave out the foods he developed. So basically he researched all of these different things and then created the kind of ideal nutrition he thinks is the ideal nutrition, or what the literature says is kind of the ideal nutrition, and that is also not so much individualized to him, but seemingly applicable to many different people. Now, ideally, so this would be step 1. Create something that is already pretty good and can be applied to many people. Now, step 2 would then be to also include the individual different things, because some people have diseases, some people have diabetes, some people want to be on a ketogenic diet because otherwise they have seizures, and so on and so forth. So therefore, there might be a step 2, which would be individualized health. So maybe you would have things that track your health and then optimize all of these different things regarding health, such as your exercise plan, such as your nutrition, such as maybe also your hydration. Maybe you get electrolyte pills that are super individualized and you throw them in, and then with your hydration you are properly hydrated. Maybe you have reminders from your Garmin watch that you should drink at this point in time this much, and so on and so forth. There are many different things or avenues one could explore. I want to now focus on Inside Tracker for once. Now, here is the basic idea now. I already talked about Inside Tracker, and in terms of optimizing my nutrition, here is kind of the concept I have come up with. First of all, I want to mention that I still eat a large chunk of my food in normal food quality. I just wanted to have a system that would allow me to every now and then, when I'm really busy, not eat. Now, this is that system. I have 4 shakers, and these 4 shakers are food powder filled to the brim with this here. Then I have a protein shaker, and this is obviously also kind of the same shaker. It's not the identical shaker, but it is still the same shaker. And then I have one that is for water. In the shaker, I have electrolytes in there. And because this is kind of a food shaker, or rather kind of a protein shaker, this is how you drink out of the shaker, by the way. So if we take off the lid, and I did not drink as much as I should have drunk out of it, and now I just drank on camera. So if you take off the lid, then you do realize that there is a lid. So if I have electrolyte capsules and I throw them in there, because the electrolyte capsules are made to be dissolved only by stomach acid, if I throw them in there, then this lid keeps them from me drinking them. And because they dissolve then over time, you have effectively a time release. So I throw these capsules in there, which means I have electrolyted water in the first shaker, but also in the second shaker. So I can refill this shaker with water at every tap, and then I get salted and also electrolyted water, because there is salt in these electrolyte capsules, which means I don't have to salt my water with like a manual salt or have salt lying around here. I just have these capsules and I throw them in there. I throw in 2 capsules, which is the recommendation for electrolytes, and I throw them in daily, and that's what it looks like. And also this shaker is kind of leaking, because the top here is made out of not Triton, so the bottom seems to be made out of Triton, and this is just softer plastic, and this seems to bend if you wash it out, or it also seems to bend if you don't do anything, or I don't know why it exactly bends. Then I have this. This is the food shaker. Now, these other two contain powder. In there is just powder. So this is protein powder, the other one is food powder. Now the food powder, in an ideal world, would be food powder that is individualized to you. And maybe you would even keep 2 shakers of the food powder. But the problem obviously is that over a given day, it cannot adapt in real time. So for now, you have to kind of think of these bigger and long term. So it is not only not individualized to you specifically, unless you individualize it to you specifically, but it also is not individualized, or it also is not brought down in a temporal dimension to your needs. So you might, for example, adjust this every 10 years. You might adjust the formulation of your food shake every 10 minutes, depending on what you actually need. And then, of course, the question of meal frequency again is here. Is it maybe optimal to eat 15 times a day and to have it already mixed into your water, and then you just drink your water and then you have the ideal nutrients in there? So sometimes there is actually nutrients in there, sometimes there is not, depending on the time of day. But maybe every time you drink your shaker, that would be also, I don't know. I actually made this video yesterday, and the concept that I came up with was kind of this. Maybe you had something like this, a bottle, and then you would carry your bottle around, or maybe also you had these dispensable bottles everywhere, and then you would just put them onto a station, similar to a wireless charging station maybe, and then tubes would connect on the bottom, and then there would be some mechanism where this closes and is kind of also waterproof. Now, you would put this on there, and then you would have maybe tanks, for example, that would have access to different nutrient solutions, either in already liquid form, but then you have the problem with the transportation being the transportation is a bigger problem if you have all the water weight in there. So maybe you separate the water out, similarly to how these food companies separate the water from the food powder, and don't usually bring it to you in liquid form, unless you then want to go to a grocery store where you can actually buy the already liquid thing, but then it might be a little bit more expensive compared to the powder. That seems to be more cost efficient in terms of transportation cost. Now, you would maybe have a bar, similarly to how in a real bar you have also different taps with different things. And similarly to a kitchen, you might basically have these different nutrients in powder form. And then it would be sucked up into some mechanism, it would be mixed together, and then maybe also by touching this, you would maybe ID with your watch, and then it would transfer all of these different things, maybe also wirelessly and super securely, I don't know. And then you would basically have your kind of fingerprint at this point in time of what your nutrient needs would be, and then it would fill up, and this would be your shake. Now, it can only be a shake that is this much, and then it would also maybe potentially negate or say that you can't have another shake, because otherwise your longevity is not optimized if you want to eat 10 shakes or drink 10 shakes. So this would be maybe something that would be ideal. Or I just have this and put it somewhere on my kitchen at home, and then it would refill automatically. This would be kind of maybe the ideal. Now, for this to work, first of all, one needs to have one shaker. One also needs to have kind of an algorithm in the back end that would come up with this, what is actually needed. One also would have to have an automated order process, such as, okay, I have the supplier, and this is automatically all brought together. Maybe a food company that already makes a food shake would maybe offer something like this in the future. Just connect all of these different services, and then we actually individualize this to you. There are already some early implementations of this, such as there are some longevity companies which individualize your longevity pills, or I don't know. I have some early signs of this, but in terms of food, there seems to be nobody that actually adapts this to you, unless you get your personal chef and your personal trainer and link them all together. So it might be not so much a digital system, but much rather a classical system with different components that might also be human. Now, in order to now approximate this, I have come up with a system. This is what I actually wanted to discuss in this video. Everything else was up to this point was mostly basically the pre-assumptions I wanted to discuss in order to properly explain this train of thought I now have had. Now, here's the idea. I have my water shaker, I have my food shaker. And now, in this food shaker is already my breakfast. This breakfast consists out of 500 grams of curd plus anywhere from 250 to 500 milliliters of milk, plus a little bit of water, because I put ice cubes in there in order to basically make it last longer, because it is cooled. Now, I then shake the whole thing, and then I put it usually into my rucksack, and if I go out, I then drink it out of this. Once I take it out of my rucksack, and then if I'm at home, for example, then I drink this. I drink this usually a couple of hours after I worked out, and then I get hungry, and then I drink this. And because I am already hungry, I wanted to make this video in order to explain the situation, and also now to explain these different ingredients. Because I'm already drinking the shake, and I'm also already salting this, because there seems to be kind of a salt need also with this first thing, and there is also water in it, so it also serves as a somewhat hydrational thing. Now, here is now the part I wanted to discuss. I now have Inside Tracker, and Inside Tracker now has the problem that it has not very current data of me. The last data is basically the blood draw I had 3 months ago, and blood draws are also quite expensive. If I would get all of these different markers drawn, so I would get the blood drawn, and then I would have determined all of these different markers that Inside Tracker would allow for, then I would pay 250 euros for every single blood draw, which is a little bit pricey. Now, nonetheless, in the, I think, next years, maybe in the next decade, maybe I won't live as long until something like this becomes available, but nonetheless I wanted to go already kind of into making something that is kind of approximating this idea. And so now what I've come up with is, first of all, separating all of these different things of my nutrition into these different buckets. What I also already have is kind of the stack that I personally am updating. So there is the stack that I currently take, which is 10 grams of creatine. There is also turmeric. There is also electrolytes, which is basically the third thing. And then I also take omega-3 fatty acids. So this is 2 grams of EPA. Maybe don't copy this, because this is individualized to me, by me mostly. Now, of course, I'm relying on different sources. I'm listening to Huberman Lab, and I'm also watching videos like Brian Johnson's, and then I'm updating my hair prevention routine, and so on and so forth. Of course, I'm not making this up on my own, but mostly it is the combination of different things I heard and read about. Now, what if now I had an additional supplement stack? And this supplement stack could be part nutrition, part supplements, similar to how supplements are also part nutrition and part supplements. And this shake is something I already drink. So if now somebody, of course now I have also to make this service for myself, but if somebody else or something else, something that is external, now would take basically my blood, or let's just say this thing had access to my blood data, and it would then, with all the data it has on me, and with all the data it has in terms of science. So there have been studies like this, and this is heart disease, and heart disease is this likely to knock you out basically at this age, so therefore we optimize for strength at this age, and currently right now you did this training in the morning and you're this hydrated, and so on and so forth. So maybe, let's not make it too complicated. Let's just say I could afford, or I would prioritize getting my blood drawn every month. Currently, what I'm trying to aim at is once a year, and currently I only pay, I think, 50 or 60 euros for a limited amount of markers. But let's just take it to the extreme. Let's just say, okay, I have something like Inside Tracker. Inside Tracker is now just a stand-in for a service like this. And this now, maybe also Inside Tracker and Garmin work together. They already kind of work together, but build a system which manages your health. Now, Garmin is kind of a system that manages your sport health. Inside Tracker is a system that also manages your health and also has a few habits in there, and so on and so forth. So here is now the idea. I already drink this shake. The rest of the day can be either a food shake, which already is kind of what I'm implementing or have implemented. The rest of the day can be either a second curd shake, it can be a food shake, or I can have dinner at home. This is kind of what I'm currently doing. Now, I also already experimented with drinking a curd shake, then I drink a shake that is a food powder, and then at home but I eat it once. Here is now the idea. Either the second shake could be a food shake that is basically not this shake, but maybe also the third shake, not the third shake, but the first shake of the day could already be the shake that contains everything kind of you need, apart from properly scaled macronutrients, so properly scaled protein and so on and so forth. But now, here's the idea. Inside Tracker at this point in time has recommendations. Now, I of course have to go out myself and order this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing, potentially. I have not expanded my supplement stack this much. But what I've taken a look at the different things I already have at home. And I already had a few things actually at home. So within Inside Tracker, and again, Inside Tracker is now just kind of a stand-in, you can optimize, you can select your goal you want to optimize for. In my case, I optimized for inner age. Now what this means is that it gives me 29 actions. It also has my blood results, and so there are different results in there. You have your blood results. Let's just get onto the ones that are optimal. I don't want to expose my weak points too much on the internet, so these seem to be optimal. This is nice. Now, these are optimal, some others are not optimal in my case. Then you also have activity. And for example, I only slept 6 hours last night, and before this I slept longer, so last night I actually slept longer than this, and it also gets my VO2 max, it also gets my deep sleep and my resting heart rate, and it gets it from Garmin. Now it knows these things, and so if I didn't get enough deep sleep, for example, maybe that actually made me more sensitive to carbohydrates this day. So maybe in the food shake would not be something like this, but this would be an algorithm or something external or anything, an entity that would make real-time changes at least once a day. But currently, let's just say, okay, we don't have this right now. You have fitness trackers right now. And the whole idea is, what can I do right now? What can I do right now is to get my sports somewhat optimized by Garmin. Now, I still make my own plan, and I don't just randomly do interval training because Garmin says so, but I kind of made a few changes to my training, as Inside Tracker, for example, said I should include more aerobic training, and then it also automatically tracks it. So in terms of activity, for example, if we go at home, then we have these different recommendations. These recommendations now can either be something that you do, so behavioral things, but eating things is also something you do. So basically, all of these are behavioral, you could say, but some of these are also regarding food. Now, all of these different things are now individualized. They know, so Inside Tracker knows what my VO2 max is. Inside Tracker knows that I want to optimize for longevity. I want to decrease my age. I basically want to slow my speed of aging. This is a program that does exactly what Brian Johnson wants it to do, but Brian Johnson does not have a program. Blueprint at this point in time does not really exist. It is just food products, and the algorithm is not actually really there. The algorithm is maybe Brian Johnson himself, is Oliver Solman, is both of them talking about something. Maybe he also uses something like Inside Tracker, maybe he also uses multiple different things and services, and he still doesn't have an algorithm. So as I was trying to do something like this myself and trying to copy him basically, because I think what he is doing seems pretty reasonable, then I was coming up with this idea: what if I just now turn all of these food recommendations into something that is something that is a shake, and then I can add this to either the first shake, but since I usually drink the first shake every day and the other one not so much, it would make sense that at this point in time, if I want to eat only powder during a given day, I would have this shake. I also have my supplements usually in the evening, and I also tried taking creatine before training in the morning, but then you have to fill a glass of water, you put in the creatine, you have to mix it, then you drink it, and then you have to wash out the glass of water again, which is something that just takes time. And if I do this for different supplements, then I don't want to do this. The same is true for measurements. I tried in the beginning to measure a lot of things daily until I realized maybe I do a few things weekly, and this optimizes my time better. Because at some point in time, you also have to ask yourself, how much are you doing for longevity, and how much time are you getting? Of course, then there might be additional other variables, such as maybe the time in the future is better because you have access to maybe optimal food, for example, and so on and so forth. And maybe technology is advancing at faster and faster rates. Maybe it is not. I don't know. So this is the thing I'm already drinking after training. This already contains 60 grams of protein plus the protein from the milk, which I haven't calculated, but it contains around 660 calories. So now what if I take so I basically just copy. I just copied the recommendations, at least the ones I already accepted. So there would be 29 recommendations from Inside Tracker, and I now adopted 10 because these have the highest impact, and also these are things that I actually want to do. So one would be incorporate more olive oil. I already now incorporated this because I'm somewhat in the evening, at least this point in time, I have incorporated more carbohydrates again, and I'm making pancakes and I'm using frying oil for this. And so I usually have probably 2 tablespoons of olive oil in there. The next one is that I should aim for a veggie day. And because I have been eating the pancakes, even though I previously ate a little more meat again after being vegetarian for a couple of years, I already probably have done a vegetarian day every now and then, and this is probably in order to optimize some of my blood markers. The next thing is eat a probiotic food. Now, what I already have been doing is eat sauerkraut every now and then, and so the rule I made for myself is to just eat 3 cake forks of sauerkraut in a given day, and then the habit is fulfilled. Now, Inside Tracker does not automatically check all of these habits, but it allows you to send notifications. I have not tested it whether the notifications can also be checked off already in the notification. This is available for notifications that come from my habit tracker. So within my habit tracker, I have, 300 to 400 different habits, some of them archived. I constantly update them, and then I track different things with, this is basically just a tracker. But also these ideally should be fulfilled in a given day. And then they also turn up only once a week if it only should be fulfilled once a week. So for example, on Sunday, I get a recommendation at 9 p.m. Not a recommendation, but a question. Did you go to the sauna today, and did you stay in the sauna for 10 minutes? That's the first one. Then did you stay in the sauna for 40 minutes? Because that's the thing I'm trying to do. And usually that's not the case, because I usually do 2 sessions and then already I have a different rule, and then it gets complicated real quick. But this is kind of the general principle. And maybe you could automate this also with Inside Tracker. The next recommendation is eat flaxseed daily. So now, if I want to eat flaxseed daily, how do I eat flaxseed daily? The question again comes up, and the answer might be in a powdered form. And so you add all of this into basically a bucket of powder. And this bucket of powder is then something you can add to the otherwise existing liquid, which you already drink as your kind of post-workout shake, which then also happens in my case to power me through a few additional hours until I eventually eat lunch, which usually is the early to late afternoon. Sometimes lunch and dinner are kind of combined, but sometimes they are not. So the next thing would be add garlic to your routine. So I had garlic at home, and I also read through the recommendation, and I did previously not know what I should do about this, because I previously had kind of the stance that maybe I should not have like a powder that I need to mix, and then every week I need to mix up a little bit of garlic in there and a little bit of cocoa powder, and then I have this powder, and then I need to figure out how much I should put in there. Again, what if you had just something that was optimized to you already, and you don't have to update all the time? With Inside Tracker now, what Inside Tracker actually recommends is get your blood drawn every 3 months. So let's say, okay, I would prioritize this, or in theory, let's just say, okay, I could get this every 3 months. Then I could get all of these recommendations to update every 3 months. Then I would take all of the food recommendations, and of course I am doing this myself, but I can also do kind of a service for myself. I would also try out a different type of dairy. I would also continue to get sunshine at least 20 minutes a day. I would also enjoy some dark chocolate. Now, I don't want to enjoy some dark chocolate because there's sugar in it, and I try to avoid this, which seems to be reasonable based on my tests so far. But in there is also the option that you can also eat a tablespoon of cocoa powder or cacao powder, depending on what the proper word for it is. And so this is also something I can put into these second supplements. Now, because there is flaxseed already in there and also olive oil, this might add up to a couple of calories already. Now the idea is, okay, I work out in the morning, fasted. Why? Because it's simpler. I don't maybe then take creatine, because maybe it does something, but then maybe I took creatine like 10 minutes later, and also if I take 10 grams of creatine, as I currently am doing, then I need additional water that goes with this, and I only have a short limit, a very short time window from the time I stand up until I go out for the gym. And so I might have to drink a little bit more, but then if I drink too much, then I have urinary urgency during the workout, which is not something that optimizes for the time efficiency in terms of the workout, because then I have these broken up things where I now have no work, basically, mentally, and so on and so forth. So the basic idea is to just say, okay, in some interval, something like Inside Tracker is basically providing real-time feedback in order to try to improve me. Now, Garmin already also does this, but more in terms of sport. I also currently am doing this mostly myself. I take a look at my HRV, I take a look at other metrics, I take a look at my VO2 max, and in the last 12 months, for example, I increased it from 53 to now 56, which is nice, I think, and which seems to be some evidence that some parts of whatever I'm doing are working, because increasing your VO2 max seems to be fairly reasonable in terms of optimizing for longevity. Now, the idea is that even if now I can only get kind of a pre-made food powder, I could also mix my own food powder, but then I would have to function, I would be kind of my own employee and also executioner, not executioner, but the one that also executes this. And you could also employ somebody who does this for you, maybe somebody who cooks for you, called a cook. So that's maybe why rich people have cooks, because then they just outsource all of this and then maybe optimize their nutrition. I don't know. Currently, I'm doing this myself, and probably also will be, unless there is a company that offers something like this. If I then have this shake I already make, I make this shake once a day because I just have to make the shake if I want to eat it once a day. And also, I cannot refrigerate this because otherwise the water in it expands, and therefore the shaker itself is then expanded and probably not waterproof any longer. If I make the shake already, what I can do is mix the different ingredients. Now I can also pre-make these different ingredients, maybe for a week, maybe for the next 3 months, if I get my blood drawn every 3 months. So then you would measure again, and then you would adapt this again. And then you would just copy paste all of these different food recommendations, like I now have 1 tablespoon of cacao in there. I also have, let's take the different, let's say the different recommendations. Also try out a different type of dairy is not really the recommendation that actually says. So try out a different type of dairy could also be just eat 2 servings of dairy a day. But it also says try out a different type of dairy. So I previously checked it off only when I actually did try out a different type of dairy. But then what is different is something that is different if you have it in the frequency of 2 weeks, and then additionally you don't have it in the next 2 weeks, and I don't know what exactly makes sense. And maybe something that is a different type of dairy is a dairy you don't try in 12 months, and then you try it again, and so on and so forth. So I would wish that Inside Tracker would predefine these things a little bit better, because otherwise there is too much leeway, and then I don't know if I can track this, if I should track this, because there is the uncertainty that I make a mistake and I pollute the data thereby. The idea now is that these would be automated. Whatever is in this and it's then added to this would be automated. Then, if it's 10 o'clock, which would also be slightly automated, because I can set a recommendation to now drink the shake. But usually that's not what I'm doing, because I think the algorithm that is my hunger is a little bit better, at least if I don't expose it to things that try to manipulate my algorithm that is hunger, such as junk food, for example. So if then the time arrives, then I have all of these powdery supplements in there, and then I just have both of these mixed. I just have them now into different shakers, and then I would drink this shake. And then I would have at least partially an automated nutrition. And then for the rest of the day, if these are already the recommendations, then I checked off all of these different things. I still take my personal or my normal supplements. I also already have now the creatine in there, and creatine in powdered form is cheaper than in capsule form. I already am mixing the shake, have been mixing the shake for months now, and have been drinking the shake for months now. So this would be just an add-on, and again, it is already kind of externalized. But the problem is that I don't have a frequency of blood draws that seems to make sense in terms of the adaptations, not the adaptations of the changes, and so therefore the result is not something that actually has kind of an impact, or the impact at least is not measured, even though, so in 2 months, for example, these recommendations might still be from the data, like from the blood draw I did in December, and might not be up to date. That's what I'm trying to say here. And this is then, in total, the part that is the current state of how I could optimize and my nutrition for time, but also my nutrition for longevity. And so, to summarize again, I have 4 shakers. I usually have 2 of the shakers on the outside of my rucksack. There are 2 pockets, and one is the food shaker, one is the water shaker. The water shaker has the electrolyted capsules in it. The food shaker has this in it, once I drink this out, I then fill in additional water, I shake it a bit, I drink the water out, I do this 3 times, then usually it's considerably clean. I don't need to wash the water shaker, usually maybe once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week I wash it actually out. But other than that, because the water in there is only electrolyted, there seems to be no buildup. And because I also drink out of this again and again and again, I only wash it a few times a week. Now this year, on the other hand, I need to wash daily, but once, and because I need to wash it daily, there was also no point in getting these different shakers and then just filling them up with water, because this would basically expand how many shakers I need to wash in a given day. And now, if I already have this, then I might as well add something that is now kind of provided by an algorithm. Of course, I have to go and buy the different supplements myself, but this is also just kind of, it's just kind of I don't know what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is there is already a part of me that goes through the grocery store. If I just add a few of these things to my grocery store list or to my Amazon buying list, then this is something that is already kind of managed by me, but in a kind of different time. It's already partially segmented from the me that is trying to now think up new things. And so then, once I am in my kitchen, I just take out all of these different things, mix them together. Maybe I already pre-made them for a week, for a month, for 3 months, and then I pour it in. I mix it anyway already, so it's only kind of an incremental change that now means that part of my nutrition is kind of optimized according to my blood work.